Prabhupada Sri Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Satva Swami Prabhu Ki Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopagopnath Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Sri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Nil Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Yamuna Mai Ki Ganga Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Devi Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Vrindavan Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Nitai Gaura Premananda all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada.
Gastlich und macht die. Das ist schon eine Medikation. Hast du geschafft? Ja. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 23, Text 15. And since we have some newcomer, Ines, we will just also give some introduction so that everybody knows what we are actually doing here and that we are talking about. Wo 17? Yeah, sorry. I just opened where the bookmark was. Okay. So Srimad Bhagavatam, I will explain later what is Srimad Bhagavatam. But how it works, we come together every morning and then we recite one verse from this book. And you can see the verses on the board. And now what we're going to do, we're going to recite the Sanskrit together. Indriyeshu manastani,
Indriyeshu manastani,
Indriyeshu manastani,
Indriyeshu manastani,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Mahatyatmani Sandade,
Mahatyatmani Sandade,
Mahatyatmani Sandade,
Mahatyatmani Sandade,
Indriyeshu manastani,
Indriyeshu manastani,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Mahatyatmani Sandade,
Mahatyatmani Sandade.
Please repeat and please chant.
Indriyeshu manastani,
Indriyeshu manastani,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Mahatyatmani sandate,
Mahatyatmani Sandade. Indriyeshu manastani,
Indriyeshu manastani,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Mahatyatmani Sandade,
Mahatyatmani Sandade. Vaishnavi.
Indriyeshu manastani,
Indriyeshu manastani,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Tanmatreshu yatotbhavam,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Bhutadinamun Utkrishya,
Mahatyatmani Sandade,
Mahatyatmani Sandade.
And now we come to the word for word translation. Indriyeshu,
Indriyeshu,
in the sense organs.
in the sense organs,
Manaha,
Manaha,
the mind.
the mind,
Tani,
Tani,
the sense organs.
the sense organs,
Tatmatreshu,
Tatmatreshu,
in the objects of the senses.
in the objects of the senses,
Yata Uppavam,
Yata Udbhavam,
wherefrom they generated.
wherefrom they generated,
Bhuta Adina,
Bhutadina,
by the five elements.
by the five elements,
Amuni,
Amuni,
all those sense objects.
all those sense objects,
Utkrishya,
Utkrishya,
taking out.
taking out,
Mahati,
Mahati,
in the Mahatattva.
in the Mahatattva,
Atmani,
Atmani,
unto the ego.
unto the ego,
Sandadhe,
Sandade,
amalgamated.
amalgamated.
And then, as you saw in the Bhagavad Gita, usually then there is a translation and a purport. So we're going to read first the translation. He amalgamated the mind with the senses and the senses with the sense objects, according to their respective positions. And he also amalgamated the material ego with the total material energy, Mahat Tattva. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In respect to the ego, the total material energy is sundered. How you pronounce this word? I looked it up, it means divide. You're an English teacher.
I never heard the word.
I also never heard it before, but it means begins to split. Anyway, I just speculate. Start again. In respect to the ego, the total material energy is sundered in two parts. One, agitated by the mode of ignorance, and the other, agitated by the modes of passion and goodness. Due to agitation by the mode of ignorance, the five gross elements are created. Due to agitation by the mode of passion, the mind is created. And due to agitation by the mode of goodness, false egoism or identification with matter is created. The mind is protected by a particular type of demigod. Sometimes the mind, mana, is also understood to have a controlling deity or demigod. In this way, the total mind, namely the material mind controlled by material demigods, was amalgamated with the senses. The senses, in turn, were amalgamated with the sense objects. The sense objects are forms, tastes, smells, sounds, etc. Sound is the ultimate source of the sense objects. The mind was attracted by the senses, and the senses by the sense objects. And all of them were ultimately amalgamated in the sky. The creation is so arranged that cause and effect follow one after the other. The merging process involves amalgamating the effect with the original cause. Since the ultimate cause in the material world is Mahatattva, everything was gradually wound up and amalgamated with the Mahatattva. This may be compared to Shunyavad or voidism, but this is the process for cleansing the real spiritual mind or consciousness. When the mind is completely washed off all material contamination, the pure consciousness acts. The sound vibration from the spiritual sky can automatically cleanse all material contaminations, as confirmed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. We need only take the advice of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and chant the Hare Krishna mantra to cleanse the mind of all material contamination, and this may be considered the summary of this difficult verse. As soon as the whole material contamination is washed away by this process of chanting, all desires and reactions to material activities become immediately vanquished, and real life, peaceful existence begins. In this age of Kali, it is very difficult to adopt the yogic process mentioned in this verse. Unless one is very expert in such yoga, the best course is to adopt the ways and means of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Thus one can gloriously become freed from all material contamination by the simple process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Just as life in this material world has its beginning in material sound, similarly, a spiritual life has its beginning in this spiritual sound vibration. Om Jnanatirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swadadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttara Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ramatam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitascha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tata Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I read once more the translation and the Sanskrit. Indriyeshu manastani tanmatreshu yatappavam tadinamuni krishya mahatyatmani sandhate. He amalgamated the mind with the senses and the senses with the sense objects, according to their respective positions. And he also amalgamated the material ego with the total material energy, Mahat Tattva. So we went through the verse, translation and purport, and then usually we have somebody sitting here and he will or she will give some more explanation. And in this we speak for some time. Usually we go till 8:30. So here the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is one of the Puranas. The Puranas are the historical narrations of the Vedic scriptures. So the Vedic scriptures are very vast, but then there is a part of the history as well, and the Puranas are that history. And there is not only one Purana, there is many different Puranas. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is the Bhagavad Purana. It is also called the Amala Purana, the spotless Purana. Why? Because there are many different kinds of Puranas, and yes, they relate, they tell history, but they also give a certain focus, what they want to actually achieve by telling the history. And so the Bhagavad Purana, what is the focus? Bhagavan. Actually, Bhagavat means everything related to Bhagavan. So it speaks about those people who are servants of God and God himself, naturally. And this Bhagavad Purana, it has 12 parts. And now we are in the 4th part. And over these 12 parts, it deals with 10 different topics. I don't know them by heart, but topics like Sarga, creation, Visarga, sub-creation, of course destruction, then how the universe gets populated, the Manus. So it gives a complete understanding who is God and how does he actually operate the creation. Meaning, how does he create this universe and how all the details are mentioned. And now we are in a story, we're actually just about to finish the story of Prithu Maharaj, who is a king. And Prithu Maharaj, he was ruling the world many years ago, and now in the Vedic culture, when somebody went through his life and performed his duties or her duties, then in the end one will renounce. That is in the Vedic culture very normal and natural, because there is an understanding that we are not this body, and if we want to detach ourselves from this body and prepare for the final lesson in life, which is death, we have to renounce. So then usually what they do, they go to the forest. And Prithu Maharaj, he went to the forest, he started to practice austerity, meaning he reduced his eating, then he reduced his drinking, and eventually just by breathing he would sustain his life. And now we came to a verse where it is described, and it is a very technical verse, and that's why Prabhupada, he writes in the purport, this may be considered the summary of this difficult verse. He writes it's a difficult verse because it technically describes how the material body, how a spirit soul in a material body attains liberation. No, our whole goal is to become free from this material conditioning and go back to the spiritual world. We spoke about this yesterday. So there's actually a whole process how this is done, and it is a scientific process. And in order to understand what it is spoken about here, one actually has to understand what was described one canto before in the third canto about how creation happens. Because the creation happens in a certain way, and then how to actually destroy the creation again. It just goes the way back. And it is a very technical thing, meaning we all know what are the modes of material nature. Do you know what are the modes of material nature? You will, I think, have a lesson about this in the Bhakti Yoga course, and I don't want to go into that because then the whole class will be about the modes. But in brief, the creation happens by certain energies of God coming in contact with each other and also the living entities, and then it unfolds. It's like, how can I describe? I don't really have a good example, but Prabhupada writes in the purport, there is a cause and an effect, and the effect again becomes the cause. So you have three energies. You have one material energy which is divided into three, and these are like different aspects of the same energy. Sattvagun, Rajagun, Tamagun. And then but these energies come in contact with the ahankar, and then they will manifest different things. They will manifest the mind with goodness, they manifest the senses, you know, the eyes, the ears, the tongue, the skin, with the passion, and with ignorance they manifest the gross objects, and also the subtle objects, meaning you have ether, and then you have sound. So they're connected. And Prabhupada explains that it begins from sound, and from sound comes ether, and from ether comes air, and from air comes touch, and from touch comes fire and heat and so on. And in this way, in the end, you will have all the elements, and all. It's not so complicated. If you study it for some time, you will understand how the material has been created. And now if a spirit soul wants to, because we have a body made of these elements, if a spirit soul wants to go back to the spiritual nature, naturally we have to give these elements up. And Prithu Maharaj, going to the forest, he chose to do it in a way by practicing yoga, but there is different kinds of yoga, and he chose to practice Hatha Ashtanga yoga, means a mechanical process where you sit down for a long time and you just withdraw your consciousness inside. And that used to be the practice in the previous ages. But Prabhupada, by saying that we are speaking here about a difficult verse, it is for us even difficult to understand how is actually this material nature built up, what to speak of, to know how we can get mechanically free from it. We are just not really qualified. And then he turns over to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he quotes the verse Cheto Darpana Marjanam. In the morning, you might remember, after the whole singing part, there was one prayer you recited. That is one line of this prayer. And I would like to just take a few minutes to talk about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and him giving the Sankirtan process. Who was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared little more than 500 years ago in Navadvip, that is a place in India, in West Bengal. And he appeared in a Brahmana family. You know, in the Vedic culture you have different grades in society. We hear about it about the caste system. Probably you've heard. So that is a perverted reflection, but the original system was Varnashram Dharma, meaning a person comes into this world and then we will look what kind of nature does that person have, and then by analyzing the nature it will function in a certain category of society in order to fulfill some duties and contribute to the, you know, to the society is actually one, so meaning every part has to contribute in some way. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he appeared in Navadvip in a Brahmin family, and this was not just a regular Brahmin family, actually that was a very exalted Brahmin family. He appeared as the son of Jagannath Mishra and Sachi Mata, and he had a brother. His name was Vishwarup. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that was his name he got when he took the order of sannyas, but he was called Vishwambar as a child. It was his childhood name, or they also called him Nimai. And if you look at the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then this whole point, which Prabhupada is also basically pointing out in the purport, really comes out that we know when God comes, he will always give an example for the common people to understand something. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, everything he did was to teach us a lesson. And now in this verse we speak about some rather very philosophical concept, and Prabhupada says, actually, this verse is very difficult to understand. So anyway, we just take to the chanting of the holy names, and we follow the advice of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And if we look at the biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we get really amazed how he grew up in a Brahmin family, and he was super qualified personality. They called him Nimai Pandit. Pandit means as a great scholar. There is different kinds of books where the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is described, and if you read in, for example, Chaitanya Bhagavat, which is one of the biographies, it is described how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to school. So in the Vedic culture, when a child comes to a certain age, they will perform certain rituals in order to prepare the child to go to the school. And also, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, growing up in the Vedic culture, they did it with him. So what would they do? They would make the ceremony of giving him a chalk and a kreide, and then he will have to write the alphabet. They also shaved him up, gave him a sikha, And what they also do when somebody just goes to school, they pierce his earlobes. They get a piercing. And that is a very scientific, I never got into it, but apparently it's a scientific method in order to prepare a child to listen. Somehow there is some effect which will empower the child to be more receptive in listening. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we went through all these rituals arranged by his parents, especially his father Jagannath Mishra, and then he was sent to school. And everybody was amazed to see how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the first time they taught him the alphabet, he immediately knew it. It's described that immediately, the grammar of Bengali and how he would pronounce, it was so sweet, and he was very good in immediately remembering the so-called compound letters in Bengal and in Sanskrit of these compound letters. And also it is described that he could pick up every aphorism immediately. I wasn't sure what means actually aphorism. I looked it up. It means it's a phrase which includes a kind of a teaching or lesson. So he could pick up an aphorism and immediately understood what's the meaning, and he was also able to explain it very nicely. And immediately they could see that this is not an ordinary child, he's very intelligent, and he was the best in class. But then something very interesting happened, that his older brother Vishwarup, who was, I forgot how much older he was, but he was quite some years older. He was also a very intelligent boy. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai. Shishigor Nitai Ki Jai. So Vishwarup, he was also very intelligent, and he became a great devotee of Krishna because he studied scriptures in school, and being so intelligent, he understood, hey, actually the goal of life is to worship Krishna. And he became a very exalted devotee, so much exalted that even though he was quite young, he would speak Krishna Katha to Advaitacharya. And other very exalted personalities, they would come and listen from him. And this would go on, he would speak Katha, and everybody was glorifying Vishwarup and his qualities. And Nimai Pandit, he was small at the time, 5 years or something. But then Vishwarup, being so intelligent, at one point he could understand that actually the goal of life is to become a pure devotee of the Lord. And in order to attain that, I have to give up all connection to material life. So what do I have to do? I have to take sannyas. And Vishwarup decided one day to leave home, and he took sannyas. And the whole Navadvip area was very much depressed because of so much affection for Vishwarup. Vishwarup was also not an ordinary personality. He was one manifestation of a expansion of God. I'm not sure, maybe you will also learn a bit about these different things in the Bhakti Yoga course. But he was a divine personality, and he had all the good qualities. So in the Chaitanya Bhagavata it's described how Jagannath Mishra, he almost got mad. He actually got mad because of having so much love and attachment for Vishwarup. And then now he left. He was depressed and he couldn't live anymore. But then after some time, some devotees came, including Advaitacharya, and they preached to them, saying, hey, why are you lamenting? Actually what happened to you is a good thing. Because if your son takes sannyas, your life is perfect. And so they kind of balanced their mind again and became stable. But Jagannath Mishra, what he did then, he could see Nimai Pandit was also a very good student. So he thought if he also going to study and he's going to learn about the reality of material nature, he will also want to renounce. And then if he also takes sannyas, we lose both our sons. So then what did Jagannath Mishra do? He just one day called Nimai Pandit and told him, Nimai, I will relieve you from school, you don't have to go anymore. And he told his mother that I don't want to risk that Vishwambar will also take sannyas, so we will not send him to school anymore and he can stay at home. And Sachimata immediately became worried that how can you take him out of school? What will become of him? If he doesn't learn, he will be an illiterate person, he will not find a wife, he will not have an occupation, and he cannot maintain his life. So then in Chaitanya Bhagavat it's a whole discussion that's always so nice when you observe the devotees. They always preach to each other and they will always use philosophy to make their point. So Jagannath Mishra also he preached to Sachimata saying, actually it's quite, he uses some harsh words saying, why are you so, what is it, you uneducated Brahmin girl, what do you think, Krishna is not taking care? Krishna will take care, even if he's illiterate. And he says Krishna already arranged for the illiterate groom, we say, a groom, to find his bride. So this is already arranged, no need to make some special endeavor. And then Nimai Pandit was staying at home, but he didn't like it because he wanted to go to school, he wanted to study. And so he started to do a lot of mischief, and he thought about how can I go again to school. And he came up with a plan that he went out in front of his house, and in front of, in that times they would cook with clay pots. Every time they use a new clay pot, cook, and then afterwards throw it away. So there was a big pile of clay pots in front of their house, and they were of course dirty because there was some remnants of food stuff, but also there was some black was from the fire. There's this black, and he would sit on that. And when Sachimata came, she chastised him. What are you doing? You didn't learn what is clean and what is unclean. You're sitting on an unclean pile and you are contaminated. And then Nimai started to preach to her. He said, first he said, if you don't send me to school, how can you expect from me to know what is clean and what is unclean? And then he started to preach, it's described the philosophy of Dattatreya, his oneness. He said, Mata, what is one? What is clean, what is unclean? Everything is one. Why are you making a distinction? And then in the end he said, anyway, if you want me to learn what is clean and unclean, you have to send me to school. And then she went to Jagannath Mishra and told him what happened, and they sent him back to school. And he again went to school, and he took up his studies, and he became the most brilliant student. And so much brilliant he was that he even defeated the greatest scholar in whole India at the time. Kashmir, Keshav Kashmir. His name was also Digvijay Pandit. Dig means direction and Vijay means defeat. He defeated all directions, all the Pandits. He was so intelligent. And Nimai Pandit, being a young boy, he even defeated him. And then he started to teach himself, and he attracted many students from many areas because they heard of Nimai Pandit being such a great scholar that they came to learn from him. And why was Nimai Pandit such a great scholar? Because he's the Supreme Personality of God himself. All knowledge comes from him. He's the source of knowledge. But then he showed us an example. When he went to Gaya to perform some rituals for his departed father, he took initiation from Ishvara Puri. And it is actually not described in the at least Chaitanya Bhagavat, that Ishvara Puri told him that you are a fool, you should only chant Hare Krishna. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu later on said that my Guru Maharaj, he initiated me and he told me that I'm a fool, I'm not very intelligent, so I should just chant Hare Krishna. So I was always wondering, did he actually say it? Because Ishvara Puri also had a lot of devotion for Nima Pandit. Or did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just, what do you think?
I think he just made up this to make point to the Mayavadis.
Right, he said it to the Mayavadis in
Prakashananda, I think.
In Benares. So the whole, you see there are so many stories of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he said later on that my Guru considered me to be a great fool, and that's why he told me, just take this Mahamantra and chant it and you will attain perfection. And from that moment, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that's what he did. He chanted the holy name, and what happened? He got mad.
He became crazy.
He became crazy.
Mad.
Mad.
Crazy. Yeah.
He became mad of love of God. And so that even though that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was such a great scholar, a great pandit, did he write any books? No, he didn't write any books. All he gave is the Shikshastaka prayers, 8 verses, which we recite usually in the morning, and which is basically just giving the understanding what is the Mahamantra, the chanting of the holy name, and how this is the perfection of everything. And in the Shikshastaka there is one phrase, Vidya Vadu Jivanam, that the chanting of the holy name is the Vidya Vadu Jivanam, the life of the wife of knowledge. Or in other words, the chanting of the holy name is the essence of all knowledge. Meaning there are so many books, so much knowledge. We spoke about the Vedas, there are so many different subject matters, but the very, very essence of all knowledge is the chanting of the holy name. And when his guru initiated him in this path, and he took that instruction faithfully, he immediately realized that this is true, and he never turned back. Even when he taught, when he came back to Navadvip, he was still a teacher, but what happened? Whatever the students asked him, he would always start to speak about Krishna. He could connect everything to Krishna. They could ask him about some grammatical rule, and he will explain it in a way to glorify Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave that example. And that doesn't mean that we don't need philosophy. Otherwise we wouldn't come together every morning and study, discuss philosophy. But we should always come to the conclusion again that actually the chanting of the holy name is the essence of our practice. And not only that, but it is the goal also. And it is also the way how we attain the goal. And Prabhupada reminds us again in this verse, very often he quotes the Mahamantra fully, again and again, and in this verse also he tells us that thus one can gloriously become freed from all material contamination by the simple process of chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So now we have Bhakta Roberts back, and we would like to revive the Harinam a little bit. That was actually the whole point, to make that connection in the end. So, as you know, we used to put a lot of focus on our Harinam, and Mahakrishna who also chastised us a few times that we are not going enough. And now we have a lot of festivals behind us. We didn't have much time, but we have one more month. Usually in September we also go out, so we can go out to the lake and chant Hare Krishna and perform the Sankirtan Yagya. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for your attention. It's 8:29, and if you want to make some comments amongst yourselves and to me, you can come after the class, because we would like to finish on time. And so, Hare Krishna. Have a nice day. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sankirtan Yuga Dharma ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Für mich ist Klasse immer so neu, aber ich habe mal von Bruno Ginsack bekommen. Das ist eigentlich so Stories lernen. Und ich habe es gemacht. Es ist einfach so nice, so einfach Verständnis bekommen.
Sehr nice,
Hast du genau? Weißt du, der nennt sich eigentlich mega viel Text für das. Ja. Wieso? Der nennt wieso ja. Aber dann habe ich Leben auch noch so ein
just 3 months just show now that
our work is done. Yeah. Mataji, there is breakfast now. There's breakfast. No, I mean, no rush, but just let it know.